We'll now go ahead and give a signed in user the ability to change their profile details. So for example, at the moment, the only thing that we can really give the user the ability to change is their username, or their name, so their full name. So most of the functionality already exists to do this. We don't actually need to develop much new functionality because we have a validation class. We have the ability to check if a user is signed in or not. We have form tokens, we have input helpers, validation helper, and the ability to pass the user back to the home page to tell them that their details have been updated. We don't actually have a lot to do here, so let's go ahead and actually just start to build this up and work out how easy it is to use everything that we've already put together. So I'm going to go ahead and require on the update.php page the initialization file for our code. I'm then going to say user equals new user, and from this I can determine if the user's logged in or not. Now if they're not logged in, I want to redirect them back to the home page. I could even redirect them to a 404 page, but that's probably not very helpful. So what I now want to do is, in fact, before we do anything here, let's go ahead and just build our form. So our method, as usual, is going to be post, and inside here, all we're really going to allow the user to update at the moment is their name. So I'm going to say label, in fact no, div class equals field, and let's go ahead and create a label for their name. This will just be name, and then input for their name as well. So that's obviously going to be text. Their name is going to be just name, and the value here is going to be their current name. So we want to put this in here as well. Obviously, we want to escape it. Escape using the function that we've already created, and we want to grab the data, and we want to grab their name. Okay, so we obviously need an input field here, and we want the value of this just to be update. And we also want a token as well. We've already looked at token functionality. So the value here is just going to be echo token generate. Lovely. So let's go ahead and preview this in our browser. In fact, let's create a link here to just, give it the ability for the user to click this. It just makes a little more sense. So let's just duplicate this, and we'll just say update details or something, and this will be update.php. So now that we're on the home page and we are signed in, we click update details and we get this page here, the ability to enter a name and also update. So we click update, and that data is submitted. So now that we have our form created, we can start to check whether we have any input. We can check whether the token exists, if that's a correct token or not, to prevent cross-site request forgery. So we're going to say if input exists, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to check if the token that's been supplied is the same, or we want to check that's the same as the session. So we have a method to do that, and we pass in input get token. If that's the case, then cool, we'll just echo out OK for now, just so we can see that this has worked. So let's go and update. OK, so perfect. We know that that's worked. So now we want to go ahead and validate stuff, and this is really important because we want to validate it to the same standard as we validated it as we register a user. So we want to say validate equals new validate, and we want to say validation equals validate check. Now we want to check the post data, and we have an array of rules as we already know, and we only have one field here, so let's say name And we obviously need to define whether it's required, which is true because we required it for registration, so why wouldn't we require it for an update? We want a minimum value, which was 2, and we want a maximum value, which was 50, and that's it. So we then check if the validation has passed. So if validation passed, we want to go ahead and update. Otherwise, we want to loop through the errors that were returned. So for each validation errors as error, we want to echo out the error and append on a line break. So it's functionality that we've already built, we know exists in our application, so we don't need to worry about it. So if I get rid of this and click update, name is required. If I put my name as A, it says name must be a minimum of 2 characters. You know, so we've included all of this functionality already. You know, it's nothing new to us. We're just using our application as we know that we've built it. So we're going to have a try block with a catch. And the reason for this is that we're going to actually throw an exception inside of our user method where if this fails, or basically if the database operation fails. So we have an exception here, E, and we want to die E get message. By the way, I haven't explained this, but this get message method is just part of the exception, an exception object in PHP. So this isn't something that we are actually building. Now we're going to introduce a new method on the user object. We've already instantiated this, so all we really need to do is pass or call this update method, which we haven't created yet, so we're not to confuse. And with this functionality, we want to pass a list of elements that we want to update and their values. So name is going to be input get name. That's all we need to do. So we've now completed this functionality, but we need to go back now and retrospectively create this update method. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll head over to our user class, and we'll go ahead and create a new method here. Now this method isn't going to do too much work because we already have the ability to update using our database. So we're going to create an update method. And this is going to take in obviously the fields, and by default that's going to be an empty array if that's not been defined. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill this in, but there's a little caveat here because we need to call the update method on the database object. So let's just do that quickly and then see what kind of problem we may potentially face. So I'm going to say if not this db update users with a specific ID with the fields, then we want to throw a new, throw a new exception, and we just want to say there was a problem updating. Okay, so we need to get this ID from somewhere. And what we could do is we could just say ID equals this data ID, but we want to make sure that this functionality doesn't break if there's not an ID available for whatever reason. So therefore, it's probably a good idea to sort of bake this into our update method as a second optional parameter, so we can update other records as well. For example, if we had a user panel, or an admin panel, sorry, and an admin panel allowed an admin to update a user's data, we'd want to define an ID because we wouldn't necessarily want to get the admin's ID and update it like that. So here what we can do is we can say if there's no ID being defined and this user is logged in, then we want the ID to be this data ID. Now otherwise by default this ID will be the ID that we specify. So if we were to say here update user ID of 4, this block won't run, and then we'll update here with a user ID of 4. Now, if we don't supply this, it will update the current user's ID, which is what we want. Otherwise the functionality would be useful. We're not actually going to include this in this application. So I'm going to go ahead and change my name to just Alex. I'm going to update this. and it looks like that worked, but obviously we have a few redirection issues there. We'll deal with them in a moment once we've updated successfully. If we browse here, you can see that my name has been changed to Alex. So the functionality works as we would expect. We already built the database functionality, so there's no reason it wouldn't work. So once we've updated a user's information, let's go ahead and session flash home, your details have been updated, and we'll go ahead and we'll redirect obviously to the home page. So now what's going to happen is when we update, I'll switch back to Alex Garrett. I'll click update, your details have been updated, and then you know that they're changed. So we've not really introduced any new functionality here. We've seen all this before, but what we've done is married it all together to mean that we can actually, you know, build on the functionality we've created. That's why we've created the application in this way. So that's basically how you'd update a user's details. If you were to update, say, a name, and you wanted to allow more to be updated, you just need to define it in here, and in here, that's all we really need to do.